As many of you know, we have worked very closely, my administration, with many community members and leaders. We have had regular meetings with the NAACP leadership, the African American Leadership Council, the Black Ministerial Alliance, just to have regular conversations about concerns in the community. One of the concerns that came out of that conversation was just issues surrounding the Police Civilian Review Authority in the City of St. Paul. Many of you know that the PCIARC, the Police Civilian Internal Affairs Review Commission, is a unique, really unique system that was developed over 20 years ago in the City of St. Paul in collaboration with leadership of the community, leadership of the NAACP, with representatives of the police department, representatives of various communities, including the LGBT community, to really look at how we review allegations of police misconduct in the City of St. Paul. Leaders such as Nick Kalik really were involved in those early conversations. And so as at the time that the PCIARC, which is a mouthful to say, was formed, it was really intended that it would evolve over a period of time, that it would be reviewed and looked at. And so the first real opportunity that we've had to have a very deep look into this was this last spring when members of the community asked us to conduct an audit. We hired the University of Minnesota Center for Restorative Justice and Peacemaking, who have in fact conducted a thorough audit, gone out into the community, had deep discussions with many past and current members of the commission, with community members, leaders in the various organizations that I just outlined, and just people that had concerns about this commission. I really appreciate the work that the University's Center for Restorative Justice and Peacemaking did in this. I really appreciate the in-depth look that they have taken, and they have presented us with a report that we released today. The report has many recommendations going forward. Those recommendations range from where the commission is housed, how it is supported, physically where the meetings take place, how the process is conducted, who's on the commission, et cetera, et cetera. I, at this time, have not had, I've had an opportunity to review those, but it's really important that the community have an opportunity to review those recommendations, that the community has an opportunity to really look at this report, raise questions, ask questions of our leadership, and really help us build the direction going forward as we look at potential changes to the commission. The audit is, I think, very thorough. I think it has. I think it really does provide us with a lot of suggestive paths forward. What of those paths forward will ultimately be acted upon, I think is going to be largely determined by the community conversations that we are about to begin. I have asked City Attorney Clark to conduct the community-based process, the community conversations, to set up large communities meetings and small community meetings. Give people every opportunity for feedback so that we can hear from the community what their concerns are, how this audit recommendations address those concerns, and if there are some other things that we should potentially be looking at that are not included in this audit. It is our goal in the City of St. Paul to have a process of civilian review that is embraced by the community, trusted by the community, and does right by the community. And I am convinced that through this process and through City Attorney Clark's leadership, we will have a very thorough review of the civilian review process. We will make the changes that reflect the values of our community, and we will continue to be a community that works very closely to ensure that justice is done. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Sammy Clark to just outline a little bit of the process that he intends to conduct.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important the first thing I just want to make clear is that this audit is not an end point. It really is the starting point. And the next step in the process is, hearing what the community thinks about these recommendations. So to that end, the mayor mentioned we're going to start, actually one of the audit's recommendations was to initiate a series of community conversations. And I really mean that word conversations to mean, it's not important at this point what I think of these recommendations. I think it's important what the community thinks. So we're hoping to have three meetings spread throughout the city, one on the east side, one on the west side, and then one in or near Frogtown before the end of the year, where people can come and we'll be focused on what do you think about these recommendations. Because, the PCIARC is one part of a bigger conversation about race and the justice system, about community interactions with police, but it's just one part. And I hope people, by the end of this process, will understand exactly what PCIARC is intended to do, and maybe, how we might be able to improve it. And on that point, I do want to say one thing, which is I'm excited about this. I thank the mayor for asking me to lead this effort. It's exciting. As far as I know, I don't know of any other community around the country that is really taking this on. The mayor initiated the audit. We created PCIARC sort of our own volition back in the 90s, and we're continuing that tradition of proactively working with the community to improve our processes. So I'm just looking forward to this. Along with the meetings, I should also mention I'm going to be reaching out to anyone and everyone that I can think of, hot mic, that I can think of, that others can think of, to engage with them, to have a little more one-on-one discussion about what they think about these recommendations. So with that, happy to take questions along with the mayor, but I'm looking forward to the work. So,
could you give a specific timeline? So we're gonna have the meetings before the end of this fall, and then, or before the end of this year, and then is it by next year you're gonna make a decision as to which recommendations you're gonna actually implement?
Yeah, I've asked the city attorney to bring back recommendations by the end of the first quarter of next year. Depending upon the nature of those recommendations, they may be things that we can implement almost instantaneously if we decide to do that. There are other recommendations that would potentially have to go through a council process and potentially even a charter process. We understand that this was negotiated, how the commission was set up in the first place was careful negotiations between the community members, the police department, the Federation, and we understand that will have to be a part of those conversations as well. So we want everybody to have that opportunity to weigh in, but we do expect those recommendations to be on my desk by the end of the first quarter of next year.
How much say does the police department have in how this board will be changed?
The police department will absolutely have a role in the conversation. The Police Federation will have a role in the conversation. By right and by fairness, they have to be a part of the conversation. But it is a part of the community that will be involved in these conversations, and it is the community voices that we want to make sure are lifted up because they may not otherwise have an opportunity to have their voices be heard.
When do you think we can expect some information from the police department about the officer-involved shootings of Justin Tolkinen back in March and Phil Quinn about a month ago? We have not heard much. I know these may be going to the grand jury at this point. Is there a timeline? Is there any plan to release?
Well, as you know, all officer-involved shootings do go to a grand jury, and so you really have to talk to the chief about what he would know more specifically about the timeline, or potentially the county attorney.
One of the recommendations is for a trigger for an independent, like an automatic trigger for independent investigation. Would all officer-involved shootings trigger an independent investigation?
That is one of the recommendations. That's one of the conversations in the community. Does every officer-involved shooting require that level of outside scrutiny, or are there certain questions revolving a particular shooting that would trigger that? Those are all parts of the conversation. I think one of the things that we would look at is other states that have various mechanisms to deal with officers involved shooting. I believe Wisconsin requires either their state BCA or the Attorney General's office to conduct all investigations. Whether that's a model that we would want to implement here, that would probably require some conversations between the state and the city, and see what other departments across the state of Minnesota would do. So nothing in the findings today are, we're not saying up or down to any of them right now, because we have to hear from the community before we start making final recommendations.
I know there's been a previous agreement with the NAACP, and I was understanding that you're going to probably continually be talking to them as stakeholders. I was just curious if there's been any conversations since now about the audit and like what some of those interactions have been.
Well, first of all, the audit was born out of conversations with the NAACP, African American Leadership Council, the Black Ministerial Alliance, and I have had conversations as recently as an hour ago with the leadership of all those organizations, and they are helping us shape the community dialogue, really helping us literally from getting people out to these meetings. They have just received the report themselves, and so have not had a chance to make any specific comments relative to that. They want to have an opportunity to review this as well, but they are going to be critical not only in looking and commenting on these, but also helping us bring the community to the table so that we can hear from them. Great. Thank you, everyone. One more?
Yeah, well, I understand a lot of these recommendations were made in 2009 in the Berkshire report. Does that sound familiar? And and why weren't they implemented then?
The Berkshire report, remember, was a really broad audit of many of the police department practices. The pieces of the report that dealt with the Civilian Review Commission really were not the primary focus of what we were looking for. The Berkshire report, we were looking for efficiencies in the department, how we deploy officers, et cetera. Those were the primary focus. So we've never really had this opportunity to dive as deep as this report has into those recommendations, nor did we have the opportunity to have the broader community conversation that's necessary and has been requested at this point. So, great. Thank you, everyone.